The term Upanishad is often treated as the title of a single, isolated book. In reality, it identifies a specific cluster of texts situated within a massive, interconnected oral network. A common misconception in the West frames the Upanishads as independent, free-floating mystical treatises, detached from any organized religion. To read them accurately, we have to place them back into their original structure. The Upanishads are the culminating chapters of the Vedas, the foundational body of ancient Indian scripture, known as Shruti, a Sanskrit term meaning that which is heard. These texts were composed over centuries. The earliest prose Upanishads emerged between 700 and 300 BCE, placing them firmly in a pre-Buddhist historical reality. Looking at the rigid brick architecture from this era gives us a sense of the physical pressures of the time. The Ganges Plain was undergoing intense social upheaval as agricultural communities rapidly consolidated into highly structured urban centers. This dense urbanization generated a cultural reaction. Ascetic traditions, people known as renouncers, began leaving the cities for the forests to pursue alternative forms of religious life. The Upanishads are a product of this exact tension. To understand what they are, we have to examine the rigid, physical ritual system they were designed to supersede. The Vedic corpus was a sprawling oral tradition stretching across hundreds of years. The ancient Indians required a strict logistical framework to organize this immense volume of information. This table maps their solution. The first column, the Samhitas, contains the actual physical mantras. Next, the Brahmanas provide strict rules to execute those rituals. The Aranyakas then introduce esoteric interpretations. Finally, the Upanishads mark a definitive break, entering texts dedicated to pure knowledge. This structural layout tracks a massive intellectual migration. Over centuries, the practitioners shifted their focus from outward, mechanical actions to inward, intellectual frameworks. This is why an Upanishad is literally called Vedānta, or the end of the Veda. It is the structural conclusion of the textual timeline and the philosophical endpoint of the entire ritual process. For decades, popular translations have broken down the Sanskrit word Upanishad to mean sitting down near, evoking the image of a disciple sitting passively at the feet of a teacher to receive esoteric instruction. Modern philologists argue against this passive reading. A close analysis of early Vedic language reveals a highly specific active mechanical function for these texts. Rooted in the Vedic concept of bandhu, meaning connection, these texts draw direct lines of equivalence between a physical ritual object and a cosmic reality. By mapping this hierarchical universe, the Upanishads reveal that ultimate cosmic forces are anchored firmly inside the human mind. The true function of an Upanishad is not to record a mystical conversation. Its function is to systematically expose the hidden equivalences between external reality and internal consciousness. We have to ask why the ancient Indians abandoned a functional, centuries-old system of physical fire sacrifices in favor of an invisible, internal model. As this historical analysis points out, the era was defined by a massive geographical migration. The center of literary and cultural activity moved outward from the western Kuru-Pankala region toward the Kosala-Videha frontier in the east. This migration fractured the old agrarian village routines. The society rapidly reorganized around complex royal courts and highly specialized labor. The text of the Upanishads absorbs this new environment. The older agricultural metaphors fade away, replaced by analogies drawing on the mechanics of weaving, pottery, and metallurgy. In these new urban centers, the ruling Kshatriya class, warriors and kings like Janaka of Videha, began debating directly with Brahmin priests. This cross-class intellectual integration forced the theology to evolve. The earliest of these texts, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, documents this exact intellectual shift in real time. In chapter 1.4, the text presents a radical departure from standard theology, stating, "In the beginning, this world was only the self, in the shape of a person." Looking around, he saw nothing else than the self. This passage takes the physical creation myth and internalizes it. The origin of the universe is no longer an external event. It is an act of self-awareness. Later, in chapter 3.7, the text defines an inner controller, a force dwelling within the earth, within the sky, within the breath, and within the mind, yet remains unseen and unknown by them. By locating the absolute controller inside the intellect, the system renders external deities unnecessary. The highest power is already present within the practitioner. Look at these physical ritual tools. The brick fire pits and wooden implements of the traditional sacrifice are rendered obsolete. They are superseded by the supreme authority of the immortal self. The pressures of urbanization and social integration acted as a catalyst. They forced the engine of the Vedic ritual out of the physical fire and directly into the mind. An Upanishad internalizes physical ritual to discover hidden equivalences between the individual self, Atman, and the ultimate reality of the universe, Brahman. But we must correct a distortion. They are not pristine, unified philosophical treatises. Alongside metaphysical insights, they contain pragmatic incantations, spells for greatness, rituals for lovers, and instructions for safe childbirth. This textual messiness is evidence. It proves the Upanishads are evolutionary documents, authored by multiple people over centuries, rather than curated single-author manifestos. Despite their contradictions, these texts laid down the absolute foundation for the Vedānta tradition, the philosophical framework that would dominate the subcontinent for millennia. Alongside the Brahma Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads form the triple basis of later Hindu theology, entirely reshaping how millions of people understand existence. They establish that the individual self, the Atman, and the ultimate fabric of reality, Brahman, are exactly the same thing, which leaves us with a highly technical problem. What exactly is the self? To answer that, the ancient sages realized they had to dissect human consciousness itself. They began to map the borders of reality by investigating the states of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and eventually, death.